Alrighty, Mr. Kyle Kirkland, you are running for the 20th Congressional District to replace former Bakersfield Congressman Kevin McCarthy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Alrighty, to start, I want to put aside the politics for a bit. Tell us more about who you are to our viewers. Who is Kyle Kirkland and why are you running for this seat?
Okay, well, as you pointed out, my name is Kyle Kirkland. I'm running for the 20th Congressional District. I currently live in Clovis. I'm up in the Fresno, Clovis area. I've lived up there and operated a business for the last 15 years. I'm very committed to the Central Valley. I've lived in California since 1986. Love the state and really want to be part of the fabric to help solve some of the problems here today. I haven't always lived in California. I grew up back east. I was born in Virginia. I grew up in Maine. Managed to find my way out of Maine. I went to college at Harvard, had a pretty successful academic career there, and took that success out to Stanford Business School, which is how I came to California back in the 80s. After I graduated from Stanford, I ended up in Los Angeles working in the finance community. I worked on a lot of problem solving, turnarounds, things like that. Through that, I got involved with a company that I purchased out of bankruptcy with some friends of mine. I say friends, our investor base, but they were friends. And it was called the Selmer Company. It was the leading manufacturer of band and orchestra instruments. We grew that over the course of our ownership, bought a company called Steinway and Sons, which a lot of folks know as the global American icon, making pianos, and we grew that company into what was, when I left it, the largest manufacturer of musical instruments in the United States. We had operations on 6 continents, and when I left, I was the longest serving chairman, not named Steinway, maybe even named Steinway, but I'm very proud of the fact that our product quality and our profitability was better than it had ever been. From that, an interesting segue, in the finance business, had always been exposed to the gaming industry in California, knew the size of it, knew how important it was to a lot of communities, but also knew that it wasn't really on a lot of folks' radar. Had an opportunity to get involved with gaming up in the Fresno area and did that. I bought a card room and have operated that for the last 15 years. And from that segued to being president of the California Gaming Association, which represents the card room industry statewide. It's a $5.6 billion industry, as you may or may not know. A lot of employees, even here in Kern County, several card rooms with a lot of employment, and a lot of economic impact for the area. One of the things that sort of defines me now is what I do for the community. The first third of my life was getting educated, and I'm very fortunate to have wonderful institutions and wonderful learning. The next third of my life was trying to think and put that to work and actually be productive with it. And I feel like I had really good success with that, very blessed with that. And now this part of my life is giving back. So I do a lot of nonprofit work in the Fresno area. I'm chair of the Fresno Chaffee Zoo, which is globally renowned regional destination here in California. It's a incredibly just a great organization to be part of. I'm into the animal world, if you will, and I also started an animal rescue up there to help solve some of the animal overpopulation issues that we face here in the Central Valley. So this part of my life is giving back. Why I'm running for Congress? There's not a lot of opportunities for a non-career politician to get involved and to pursue an elected office. I believe that my skill set, my problem-solving skills, my business experience sets me apart. I'm the non-career politician. I saw this opportunity avail itself and thought this was a real opportunity for me to, again, get in, serve the people of the Central Valley, and that's how I'm on this path today.
We're going to get into each of those skill sets and, quite an extensive, reputable career you have had in the business world. How did your run for this seat come about? You mentioned you saw the opportunity to jump in as a non-career politician. Why did you view this current situation as that opportunity?
Well, I think all of us have a responsibility to be engaged in politics, even if it's just paying attention and voting, right? And so I've always sort of followed politics, but in my business career, there wasn't the traditional political career path. That's not to say that I wasn't always interested in, hey, if there's an opportunity, I'd like to take advantage of that to get in and serve. As you know, here in California, predominantly blue state, I do live in the district, which has more Republican leaning, and when the opportunity arose, when Speaker McCarthy stepped down, it looked like, well, maybe there's a path here for a non-career politician, and it turns out there is. I pulled papers, I got signatures, I get feedback from the community, and what I found was there were a lot more like-minded folks than I actually thought throughout the district, and so my message was resonating with people where they just said, hey, listen, we need a non-career politician, we need somebody that is schooled in solving problems, reaching consensus, really trying to take action and get results, and that's been my entire career. So I look at this as a unique opportunity, certainly a challenge. This is a new game for me, right? But it's one where I feel like I have a unique skill set and unique set of experiences.
So you've talked about some of the Fresno voters. It sounds like a lot of them are giving their support to you as a candidate in this race. What about here more locally for us here in Kern County, right? You mentioned Speaker McCarthy. He has long had a loyal voter base here, and Kern County, quite frankly, might want a congressman from our county. So how do you target these voters? How do you appeal to folks here?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously it's a huge district, right? It comprises parts of Fresno County, comes down through Tulare and Kings, down here through Kern, obviously Bakersfield, and it's very diverse. I think there are an awful lot of folks throughout that. What I found is that regardless of our diversity, regardless of our location, really the issues that matter to us are largely the same, and they transcend sort of socio-demographic groups and location. Yeah, we all want our neighbor to be the guy that's in, but I also think we want like-minded representation that's going to solve problems. My appeal to folks in Kern County is exactly what I've said to you. Hey, I'm not the career politician, I get it, but I have a long career of getting in, solving problems, tackling them, getting to solutions, and I think that's what we need in Washington today. And I'm finding that from the folks that I meet in district throughout, whether it's down here in Kern County, up in Fresno County, they're hearing that, and they're telling me that the problems of the economy, the border situation, government overreach, water, these are things that appeal to pretty much everyone that lives in our district, right? You may have something else that's important for you in that moment, but I feel like my message is, hey, listen, I'm someone that has come in, I sign the front of paychecks, I've lived through COVID shutdowns, I've dealt with, I've been in regulated businesses my entire life. I deal with, I've dealt with folks in Sacramento and politicians. I've pushed back and advocated for our industry. And frankly, I've tackled a lot of complex problems and figured out how to solve them on a budget, right? And that's what's unique about me, is I have that skill set, 40 years of solving problems and fixing things, right? And that's what I bring to the people of Kern County.
My understanding is that this is your first time actually putting yourself out there as a political candidate. Is that correct?
It is. Years ago, I was involved in a thing called Boys State and Boys Nation, which is for people in high school, it's an opportunity to get involved in politics. That was back in Maine. And I got a little bit of the fever then, but I also, we grew up of pretty humble stock. My mom was a school teacher, my dad worked in a bank. I got on a path at Harvard where, I really got in business and got out there into industry. This is my first, organized, legitimate campaign
in your adult life.
In my adult life. So yes, that's a fair statement. But I think all of us, frankly, in any position that we have, I'm elected as president of the Gaming Association. I'm elected as chair of the zoo. And what I found is people respect those that do the work and try to find common ground and express empathy and compassion for problems and try to see both sides of it. And that's what I do. And anyone that's seen me, I've been elected by people on both sides of the political spectrum, because they look and they say, that cat does the work, right? And he can solve a problem, and that's what we want.
And the reason I asked that question is because I think some people might wonder, hey, if it's his first time running for office, why not start at perhaps a more local level or the state level, right? You're jumping straight to the federal level, to Congress. Some people might view that as a leap.
Well, I think anything's a leap. It was a leap for me when I was 33 years old to put together an organization that ended up buying Steinway & Sons, an American icon. Right? It was a leap for me to get out of Maine and end up at Harvard and graduate magna cum laude with all sorts of academic achievements. It's a leap to get out to California. There's always a leap in your life. I think you have to look and say, okay, what challenges am I going to take? What do I think I'm suited for? How do I adapt when I get in there? What I found while I've been running is, okay, there's some new skills that I need to bring to bear, but certainly, advocating for the gaming industry in Sacramento through COVID and that, I'm in front of the camera, in front of the public, and advocating for people and up and dealing with electeds. So I have deep respect for anyone that serves at any level of the political spectrum, right? But I saw this as an opportunity. Wow, this is an opportunity to take 40 years of my skills and put it to bear on national issues that have real import and real impact for the folks of District 20 and frankly the entirety of the Central Valley. And that's a rare and precious opportunity, and one that I want to jump on and take advantage of.
Are you running in the special election as well then?
Sure, of course,
okay.
Of course. And again, this isn't for me to put congressman on my resume. It's to say, listen, I very deeply believe in giving back, and this is an opportunity for me to have, very big impact. As you pointed out, I've got a pretty diverse background and skill set. I've had some pretty good exposure, and to be able to bring that into Washington and frankly, clear some of the brush and say, hey, listen, we've done this before. I think that's very important. That brings a lot of credibility with me, right? And with credibility and hard work, I've found you can get a lot of results.
And I want to touch more on the term you've used repeatedly, non-career politician.
Sure.
Does that mean you view Speaker McCarthy as a career politician?
What it means is that my path is different. I respect everyone's path, right? Speaker McCarthy obviously dedicated a good part of his career to serving the people of the district, and I respect that, right? My path is different, right? And I think that the skill set that I have and the experiences that I have are different. So this isn't to be disrespectful to anybody that's served ahead of me or anything. It's just to say, hey, of the 435 Congress people that are out there and of the diversity of that skill set, I think I bring a unique set of skills, right, to that group. And to say, okay, it's a unique set that I can bring in and help solve some of these problems that we have today. What I do think is, when I look at, Congress and elected officials or whatever, what I see from a business perspective is a lack of results, right? And that isn't pointing the finger at any one group. It's to say that or any particular person is to look at the group and say, hey, the American people deserve results from their elected officials. They deserve results from Washington. I have to do that in my business to survive. I have to do that in my nonprofit work, or we're not successful. And that's what I bring to Washington.
A lack of results. What work remains undone in this district that you want to tackle head on if you are elected to Congress, Kyle?
Well, certainly the economy. All of us feel the high cost of living every day, and that is at all levels. We all feel that. I feel that as a business owner. I know the folks that work for me and my family. We all feel the high cost of living, where it's buying food, putting gas in the car, housing, healthcare, insurance that, it's harder and harder to get. So I feel I have a unique set of skills in going and addressing that, showing folks, hey, this is how these problems came about. Here are some constructive solutions that we can bring to that and bring that forward. Certainly we've tried to make some progress coming out of COVID, keeping the economy alive or whatever, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I'm just saying if the issues that are in front of people today need immediate action. The border crisis, what we've seen there. Obviously, over the last few years in the current administration, some of the open policies have encouraged folks to rush the borders, and where we now have 5 times as many people trying to get into the United States. I think that's a real issue that everyone is concerned about, and I'm in favor of legal immigration into the United States, right? I think it's important for the Central Valley. It's important for our economy. It's important to keep, the American dream alive, to have hardworking folks come into this country. But it's also important and inherently unfair if it's not done legally, right? And that's something for me that I can go in there and say, that clearly has not been addressed, and it's something that I can look at and say, I'm trained as a business person to put my emotions and my passion aside, look at the problem, try to understand the extent of it, the resources that we have to deal with it, and then try to come up with a cost-effective solution. And so when you ask the question, what isn't being done, you can look on the TV and you can look at your own home and your pocketbook and putting gas in your car, and you can see what problems are in front of you right today. They need immediate action, and that's what I bring to Washington.
On border security, you mentioned that you are in favor of legal immigration.
Sure.
For the illegal immigrants that are already in this country, right, or attempting to cross the border illegally, the former president, who is shaping up to be the Republican nominee again for 2024, he has long proposed the idea of mass deportations, and some Republican lawmakers are on board with that. They're on board with continuing to build a border wall. What is your take on those specific actions that are being proposed by members of the Republican Party? So specifically the border wall and mass deportations of those who are here illegally.
Right. I'm a supporter of secure borders, right? I'm obviously an accomplished business person frankly, with my Steinway career, traveled in and around Europe. I can go to NATO countries. If I show up without my passport and they've been friends of ours, they're going to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Kirkland, but you need to go home. I'm in favor, and I believe that having secure, controlled borders makes a lot of sense for us in terms of understanding our national security and understanding how we need to manage immigration in this country. Immigration is broken, as we've seen, with that coming through, and an awful lot of folks are in the United States today. So on the two issues, I'm in favor of building border security, but I'm also a practical business person, and I look at a 2,000-mile border, and I say it's going to be some combination of physical barriers, some combination of virtual barrier, right? Some combination of natural barrier. But what's incredibly important is that we'll let people know, hey, it's not just an open free buffet up here. Come on in, everyone, because I think there are real national security concerns. And certainly, our infrastructure isn't set up for that, right? We've gone from 400,000 people a year to 2.2 million, 7,000 to 10,000 folks a day trying to come in. Some of them might not have the best intent for us. Some are hardworking, want to come here to pursue the American dream. All for that. On the other hand, when you look in the United States today and people are struggling with, here in California, cost of living, housing costs, shortage of housing, healthcare system that's overburdened, taxing, sort of a tax on us in the entirety. Our infrastructure can't handle that. We need to recognize that and recognize that we need fairness for the folks that are already here. What we've seen is in some of the cities or the states that are offering sort of sanctuary, when we have folks that end up there, New York struggling with 70 to 100,000 immigrants, that's only 7 to 10 days worth, right? And that's the largest city in America. So it's very clear that we have an infrastructure constraint on this. So as a business person, I look at where's the flow, how do we control that, right? What messaging are we putting forth to people? Then how are we processing that, folks to come into the country? What's the right path, right? And then, but also if they're here, can our infrastructure handle it? Doesn't do any good to more people on the ark if the ark sinks, right? So that's maybe a more practical approach than others might feel. I'm not one to get sucked into the drama, right, or the political grandstanding. I'm more into, hey, this is the problem, here's how I'd solve it. With respect to the folks that are already here, certainly, I don't know what the exact number is, but I think it makes sense in terms of fairness for the ones that, for everyone else is here illegally. It's not practical to hand wave amnesty. It's not practical to mass deport, right? What is practical with our technology and resources is to understand who's here, understand the motives, what's the right path. We have a lot, Fresno was a relocation area after the Vietnam War. There were a lot of folks for us from the Asian community that came here second generation. They have gone through the process to get citizenship, and we have celebrations and they're proud of it, but they work through it legally, right? And I think that's important, and that is not to be discounting or disrespectful to folks who are here. I understand very much that this is a great country and a lot of people want to be here, but it's also important for our overburdened infrastructure and our national security that we understand who's here, what's their motives, how do we get them into our society to be productive as quickly as possible.
But not a clear no on the border wall, right? You said you do agree with partially continuing the border wall, also virtual restrictions on coming across the border.
Yeah.
So I wanted to put a fine point on it.
Okay, so when I look, if I look at former President Trump, in my work, it looks like he repaired a lot of the existing wall, but it was symbolic. They say, hey, we're limiting immigration into the country, right? And we're putting that up. It is a 2,000-mile border, and I'm not the expert on it. What I would do is I look and say, okay, this is a significant problem. As a business person, I would say, all right, how do we slow the flow from over the border, right? How do we do that? And it's a 2,000-mile border, and we need to do that quickly and through some combination of existing wall, barriers that we could build, natural barriers, virtual barriers. I would go down, spend my time at the border trying to really understand the problem, understand where people are coming from, where that flow is, what are the bottlenecks in the processing, who's not supposed to, who are the folks that are coming with malicious intent. And then I would also expand my thinking beyond just, the government folks to business leaders and thought leaders to say, okay, if we're solving this problem, there's an awful lot of things in our lives and advancements in our lives that have happened because of the business community, whether it's Jeff Bezos with Amazon, whether it's Elon Musk with Tesla or SpaceX, right? Where they're SpaceX, for example, solving a problem that, was really an issue for governments in the past, right? And I'd go to people that are, thought leaders used to tackling complex problems, say, how do we go at this and get there as quickly as possible and find a solution?
So you're not opposed to the idea of continuing the border wall?
No.
Okay.
No. Sorry
No,
about that.
no.
I'm the practical business guy, right?
I totally
there are
get it.
few absolutes in my world. It's, hey, I've got to, I can't just take a position in grandstand. I've got, I need to solve that problem.
Right. On the topic of Mr. Trump, do you endorse the former president in his 2024 run?
Well, it's pretty clear that he's, the presumptive candidate.
Do you endorse him?
I would say I'm a team player. Who's ever the Republican nominee, and it strongly appears it's going to be Mr. Trump.
And my understanding, Kyle, is that you were registered as NPP, but you were running as a Republican.
No, that's I'm registered as a Republican.
Okay.
I was a long-time Republican, and I've always been. But candidly, I voted Republican and Democrat in elections. I'm a big fan of who's the best candidate for jobs at all levels of government. There was a time where, frankly, I felt disenfranchised, like a lot of us, with a lot of the political squabbling on both sides, and it was sort of hard to say. I mean, getting barraged by information, and so I declined to state for several years. I was going through a move. When I've moved to my new location, I've registered as a Republican. I grew up with a dad that was a banker, and I grew up with a mom that's a teacher. So I've seen both sides of the fence. But I'm a conservative but practical business outsider.
So to date, how long have you been registered as a Republican?
Since filing for the campaign.
Okay.
Right.
So is that when you made the shift? Were you NPP before, or?
When you say NPP, I was declined to state. So it was, I've been Republican up until maybe 5 years ago. And then when I moved my location and got my new driver's license and whatever, I have been declined to state. And then, as part of this process. And honestly, I encourage people to look at both sides of every political debate and try to filter through the noise and understand, what the real issues are, and also try to understand it. It's important we have compassion in this country.
And on the topic of the border, I want to tie that into foreign policy, because we see in the current Congress, a lot of Republicans are tying border security to funding for Ukraine. Where do you stand on funding for Ukraine and also Israel? Well,
those are two very different sectors of the world with different issues in front of them. I'm for peace. Right? But I understand conflict in the world. It's naive not to think of that. If you look at Israel, for example, Israel is attacked. In my mind, they're attacked by a terrorist organization, right? They deserve to push back on that. And the notion that that they're not on the moral high ground is flawed, right? They were attacked, they pushed back, and in my thinking, if you're attacked by a terrorist organization, you are allowed to push back. It's tragic, right, that Hamas would use, human shields and things like that. But that is, that's an unfortunate byproduct of how that they've been housed in Gaza. And I think that, I'm fully supportive of Israel and their pushback in Gaza. With respect to Ukraine, Russia, that's obviously a very different conflict over there. One of the things that I'm not in favor of is the United States bankrolling every conflict around the world, right? I feel like I want us to support our allies, but I also want to look for NATO and other countries to support that. It shouldn't just be that we have the biggest checkbook, so we're the ones supporting that. With respect to that conflict, any aggression down on another people, I think, is flawed thinking. And I want to support those that do have the moral high ground in any of these arguments. With respect to tying it to other policies, that's one of the things that I think is problematic in the United States today. We have these big, bloated, bulky bills with all sorts of things in it that go through instead of having these tailored bills that address the problem. And I appreciate that from a negotiation standpoint, you need to accommodate others, but I'm a fan in drilling down to exactly what the problem is that we're trying to address with legislation and not having all sorts of other unintended consequences.
So you would support funding for Israel. If you were in Congress now,
Sure.
Would you be voting to send more funds to Ukraine?
So again, in the context of Ukraine, I'm a supporter of whoever has the moral high ground. I personally believe that Ukraine has the moral high ground. I feel like with respect to other nations and others, I do believe that it's important for other nations to get involved in that, other neighboring areas in the Ukraine. I don't think the United States should just be the checkbook to solve all world conflict. And I feel strongly about that. I don't know that we can necessarily afford that, right? And I don't think that's the best policy for us to have going forward. I see more cooperative solutions than I do just, hey, let's let the United States handle it.
So no more money for Ukraine as of now? Should more American dollars be sent to Ukraine?
I think we fund the moral high ground in Ukraine where we need to, right? But I'm not the expert on that. Again, I'd approach it as a business problem. I'd look in and I'd say, okay, what is the nature of the conflict? Where's the high ground? What have we done to date? How effectively have those funds been used? What do I need to go forward? And then I'm in favor of the effective use of American dollars to support our allies and to keep our national security.
And I actually just watched your ad yesterday. I know it's airing with our channel.
Okay.
Another issue you mentioned.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you.
you've stated all your issues. I love the visuals.
Thank you.
Affordable housing was another issue
Sure.
you mentioned. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a housing crisis, and not just here in California, throughout the United States. And I think a lot of that is there's a real housing shortage. We haven't built enough homes. We haven't built enough multi-use housing. And I think that's a product of stifling regulations. I think, certainly as a business person, a lot of things come into play. The cost of land, the cost of funding, the cost of materials. The builders that I know are struggling more with the cost of the building costs and the interest costs in doing that. But they're also stifled by regulation. It's not easy to build a home. It's not easy to build multi-use housing here, or even affordable housing in the United States. And I think whatever we can do to ease that burden, what I found in my life is that businesses will respond, and the American economy is very powerful, right, and very effective at delivering what people need. Right now, people need affordable housing, but they need the barriers and the constraints to be taken off that by the government. That would be my position going is, how do we free up the burdens and the roadblocks to building quick, effective housing for people, because we have an awful lot of folks that are unhoused. We have an awful lot of folks that frankly can't afford the place they're in or struggling to afford the places they're in. And it's very clear that we need more housing. And that is not just in California. That's a nationwide issue.
That goes into my next question. What do we do about homelessness? Like you
Right.
said, it's a very big problem throughout California. We see many folks in downtown Bakersfield too who are unhoused. And like you said, again, nationwide too. How do we tackle that problem?
Yeah, and that's a real struggle in terms of understanding the source of it and where they're coming from, and and being empathetic. I'm a big person on sort of empathy, and I think we need to be compassionate. We've always been a compassionate nation, right? Even when we win wars, we help rebuild, right? So, and I think that's important for our fabric, and it's an important part of the American dream. When I look at the folks that are unhoused and that, I think it's such a huge problem. They're coming from so many different areas. I do think, I used to live in Los Angeles for 30 years. And that's changed dramatically in the last 3 decades with some of the policies that just let folks end up anywhere. So we have these tent cities and what have you. But I think I'd like to spend our money and energy trying to understand the nature of the problem. If we're spending $20 billion on housing, I want to spend it on folks that are unhoused or homelessness. I want to spend it on housing, not on salaries for folks that are looking at homelessness, right? I'm looking at the problem and saying, listen, how many folks do we have? What are the issues that confront them? How do we need, what's the most cost-effective path for us to get them into housing, right? How can we afford to do that, right? And is it sustainable? What we've seen up in Fresno County is, buying hotels, converting them into basically housing for the homeless or whatever, and then leaving it. And frankly, if you're not maintaining it, it just degrades into another, series of derelict homes or derelict tenements, right? And I think it's important for us when we're putting an investment into housing and putting an investment into solving homelessness that we go in and make it practical and then also follow up to make sure that it's doing the job. It doesn't do us any good to build a bunch of housing, put folks into it, and have it turn into places where there's crime, drugs, human trafficking, all sorts of awful issues.
Federal funds would be required for something like that.
Sure.
At the mass level. We talked about a lot of issues so far, including affordable housing, right, border security, economy. Where do you want to direct federal funds to? I know as a freshman lawmaker, it could be tough to navigate those waters as soon as you go to Congress, but in terms of federal funding, especially for California and the 20th Congressional District, where does your priority or priorities lie?
My priorities lie exactly where they are for the folks of the district, which is getting the high cost of living down, addressing the crisis at the border. And, uncontrolled crime is another problem. Frankly, unanswered crime is a real problem here in California. By that I mean property crime. If you get your car broken into, law enforcement's overwhelmed, that you fill out an online report to police report, no one ever really even responds. It goes into your insurance company. Your insurance rates go up. If they happen to catch the person that did it, maybe they get a ticket, probably don't show up at court, and they're free to do it again. That's a problem here in California because very quickly we end up with a lot of property crime that affects us in our day-to-day, right? So when I'm looking at the things that affect the American people, and frankly, I think the American people's in alignment with a lot of folks in the Central Valley. So I'm going to put my attention on those issues. With respect to federal funding, I'm going to make sure, I'm a big fan of making effective use of the money spent. So if we are spending money on infrastructure or things like that, I'm not going to house it or try to put it in some euphemistic terms that this is the Inflation Act or whatever. No, I'm going to put money into to solving those direct problems. I do think federal funding, effective federal funds to help ease homelessness, to help bring down, to ease off in terms of some of the regulations on business that have forced up our cost of living. I mean, honestly, the cost of living is not only because of inflation, it's also because we've had supply constraints. It's because we've had, excessive government regulation. There are a lot of factors that factor into costs, right? And to the extent that we can actually ease those and make it easier for people to provide goods and services for people, they get cheaper. And if it gets cheaper, our quality of life goes up, right? And I think that's what the American people want. So I'm going to put my time and energy into funding that affects those two very real issues for folks. And again, we talked about the border. We clearly need to spend federal money solving our border and our immigration issues. So
go ahead.
But I can't be more clear. I want that to be spent effectively. Mm-hmm. Nothing is more frustrating, especially those us in the business community, or frankly at home, where we have to live within our budgets and we have to live within the spending that we have, to see money wasted or spent frivolously and then just funded with T-bills that we sell to a foreign country and hope the next generation can pay for it, right? So.
And specifically on the border, I just want to quickly go back to it in terms of funding. To be super clear, when it comes to border security, you said you'd invest money to do what? So
again, all right, my business approach is to go and find where it's needed most. I would spend time at the border, right? I think it was a travesty that our the current administration wasn't down on the border, understanding the problem, talking to the people, the Border Patrol agents, the folks that are dealing with it, looking at the data, and not just massaging it for their own political gain, being honest and intellectually honest about that. So I would go ask the people that are involved in it and say, okay, what do you need and what's going to be effective, right? If I'm a Border Patrol agent and someone in Washington is just dictating the spending and it's not on something that I needed, and the example I would be, is if folks are serving overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan and we're sending them over, fans and electrolyte water and what have you, and what they really want is armor under the Humvee, I want to talk to the guys that are at risk, the men and women that are at risk, that are engaged in it, that have the best information to say, hey, here's how we slow this problem. Here's how we deal with the crisis that's in front of us. Here are the resources that we need. So I'm going to talk to the folks that are on the front line, understand what they are. I'm not sitting here with you today, I'm not the expert on that, right? And I shouldn't be pushing that down. I should talk to the people that are closest to it, advocate for them and getting them the resources they need.
And on the topic of crime, so you would support tougher legal consequences for criminals?
I support consequences, right? There are no consequences, right? Forget about just tougher legal consequences. We see property crime up in Fresno, Clovis, and it just goes unanswered, right? And that's not to be disrespectful to law enforcement. I think, they've been challenged certainly by, propositions that say, oh, well, these, it's not a felony. And we see that. We see repeat offenders, right? In my business, we have to spend a bunch of time and money and energy, surveillance, security patrols, to make sure our guests come in, they're safe, their cars are safe, so they come in and be able to enjoy our experience. So when we see crime that's unanswered, that's appalling to me, right? And I think, I lived in, as crazy as this sounds, I never had my car broken in back east, but this was years ago. I lived in Los Angeles for 30 years, had my car broken into once. When I've lived up in, Fresno County, it's been broken into repeatedly. You have to have a heightened awareness of where that is. And I think I'm not unusual in that. Certainly folks throughout the Central Valley, you see smash and grabs. You don't need to do a smash and grab of a Louis Vuitton to pay put food for your kids, right? Let's be honest with ourselves and what we're seeing, right? But I think it's important for us to have consequences when people are breaking the law and violating the law. And unfortunately, law enforcement today they aren't given the resources or the latitude to enforce the law, right? So I'm an advocate of trying to repeal some of the propositions that, basically, made it okay to engage in property crime or make it, no consequences. That put consequences back in place, and also get resources to law enforcement to do their job.
And going into some of your opponents in the race, Kyle, who do you view as your biggest opponent in CD20?
I think the biggest problem I have is my own name recognition. I've always thought my competition is me, right? I compete against myself. I wake up every day feeling like, I can do more. I've got an 85-year-old mom that hopes I'm going to make something of myself someday, right? I look at my life and say I'm driven by, being productive and leaving good legacy. So I feel like I'm my own competition. Certainly I know the other folks in the race. I think I'm very different than them, right? I have deep respect for anyone that's, has given service to people. I have deep respect for law enforcement. I'm concerned about getting my message out, making sure people know who I am, right? And understanding what I stand for, because I think when I do that, people understand, hey, that guy is like me, right? And he's in a position where he can articulate, think, act, he works. Everyone I've ever worked with have looked at me, as I said before, it's like, that guy does the work. And I think once people really realize it, they understand that I'm the best candidate for that. So, my challenge is getting my message out, and that's why I'm here today.
So what are you doing? I mean, you said you're out here today to help campaign, but also are you door knocking? I mean, we mentioned your ad earlier. What can people expect to see from you, and where can they expect to see?
You're going to see more of me, right? Obviously it's a very short runway in terms of what we had with the campaign, and honestly, some folks that are more seasoned in this and have run in other elections, they understood what they were looking at more quickly. I had to get in and actually understand the game a little bit and sort that through. So I feel like right now I'm playing a little bit of catch up, right? But we're advertising, we're getting our messaging out. certainly have websites up, framing our issues, getting in front of media like you folks. I'll be speaking this weekend at one of the local Republican organizations with my colleagues in the race. I think that's what I'm doing, getting myself out and letting people know who I am. I also have a pretty good ground game that's being put together, and I've got an awful lot of people in the animal community that are very excited about getting more visibility on their cause. And I think that's a big thing there, where people feel like, hey, that guy can represent me, and he's represented me when it didn't matter. Well, there's a lot of people in Fresno that can look and see what I've done and say, hey, that guy showed up in the middle of the night to solve a problem for me, and when others wouldn't, right? And that's what I bring that's different. So once people see that I get engaged and can empathize and wrap my head around a problem that maybe they can't and help them find a solution, that's a pretty engaging campaign pitch, right? So that's what I'm trying to get out there.
I'm going to touch on your being an animal advocate in just a bit, but on the topic of candidates, you mentioned there are some seasoned ones out there. I mean, I think most notably it's Assemblymember Vince Fong, who is described as McCarthy's handpicked successor. As you know, Assemblymember Fong is in the midst of an ongoing trial with the Secretary of State regarding his congressional candidacy. Do you view Vince Fong as a legitimate candidate? And as someone in the race, do you think he should be allowed to run?
Oh, I think anybody that wants to run for political office should be allowed to run. I'm not in favor of some of the politics that have gone on at the presidential level, right? Pushing people out of the race, and I think we've seen that from Governor Newsom, where he's just even said, I'm not in alignment with Governor Newsom on a lot of different policies, but he came out and said, hey, listen, let the people decide. I feel like with respect to this race, I came late to understanding the nuances of the law. I know that it was decided by the court to allow him to run. I know the Secretary of State pushed back, but I also know that the appeal process takes time and this election is going to be over. I need to worry about Kyle Kirkland running and getting his message out. I think, Assemblymember Fong will do just fine. I know he's a protege of Speaker McCarthy, certainly has been an elected official before. Sheriff Boudreau has been an elected official before, right? So I look at this as, again, I'm getting my message out, right? I believe that I'm very different than those other candidates, and I respect what they've done in their respective careers. In looking at the problems that are facing the electorate today, the folks of the Central Valley, the folks of District 20, folks of the United States of America, I believe I have a unique set of skills and the right set of skills to get in and get action and solve problems quicker than others. And I feel very strongly about that.
But do you view him as a legitimate candidate? Does it feel unfair to you if he's allowed to run?
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about fairness, right? If you're playing a football game and you're thinking about the last call, all right, you're going to end up losing the game. You got to put it behind you and just look forward. There's a reason why the rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield, right? I mean, it's like I'm looking forward, right? So he's running his race. He's clearly a candidate, right? The courts have allowed him to run. He's a candidate, right? That's a legitimate competitor in my mind, to your point, right? It's a mistake not to think of anyone in this race as a competitor.
Right. They're all in it to win it. Let's talk about animals first. I know that's a big part. I mean, at the local level, you've been doing a lot, whether it's actually taking care of those animals or contributing funds to them.
Sure.
How does that translate to Congress, and will it translate at the federal level?
Oh, it definitely translates. I mean, it's helping people, right? I mean, it's, I put a lot of the last, 10 years of my life, I've put almost every, the money I make back into the community, right? And it's about giving back, and it's about solving problems. With the animal community, I just, everybody loves their pets, right? And, I saw a real problem in terms of animal overpopulation. It's not that I grew up saying, hey, I want to be responsible for 500 animals in a corresponding day. It's a lot of mouths to feed, right? But it is, it's one where I said, this is a very serious problem in the Central Valley. The animal overpopulation is a health crisis, whether we believe it or not. And frankly, no one was putting any kind of business thought into how to solve that problem, and that's what I brought. Certainly get wrapped up in the emotion of it, and I definitely love the feedback that I get from people when I've helped them with their injured animal or their at-risk animal. So I love that. But that to me translates directly into Congress. It's about going to work, solving a local problem that has national implications. This is now animal overpopulation is now after COVID, after we shut down and didn't allow veterinarians and spay-neuter clinics to do their work. Now it's a national problem, so it's something we deal with on a national level. So
national level, but it might not be top of mind
of course,
necessarily for the American people.
We've talked about what are the 3 key things for people, right? So you focus on those. As a business person, I need to focus on, the ones that, I say this all the time, a dog that chases 3 rabbits goes hungry, right? I mean, you need to focus and pick a lane and pick something, pick a problem that you're going to solve. It's not enough. There's a laundry list of things that affect the American people. I just happen to stumble into the animal things as part of my work, and it's been very rewarding, and I enjoy that, but directly translates to others. And it doesn't mean that I'm not very capable of dealing with some bigger substantive issues that are in front of the American people. I challenge anyone in this race to go head-to-head with me on economic issues, right? That is my game.
And let's very quickly touch on Steinway. I know that was a significant part of your career. That'll be our last question.
Sure.
Kyle.
I mean, it's something I'm obviously very proud of. For those of us in the music community know of that American icon. As a young person, I bought it with my business partners, a fledgling instrument company out of bankruptcy, and added the Steinway brand to that. It's iconic. At the time, it had just come out of some restructuring and some struggles. My role in that was understanding the problem and then letting the people that knew it best do their job, exactly translating what's happening at the border. We went to the folks that were working on the piano, struggling and said, okay, you're great at making instruments. That's what I want you to do. Give me the information, tell me the tools and resources you need. We'll get those to you, and I'm confident you guys will solve those problems. And that's exactly what happened. And over the course of my tenure, we ended up, our product quality went up, was restored to its prior glory, and it was the most profitable it had been in its history to that point. I'm very proud of that. It's something I think about all the time. And frankly, it was a lot of fun going to other countries and having that visibility of that brand. It made me very conscious too of brands. I think the United States brand, it's incredibly important for us to continue to preserve. That American dream and the American brand needs to continue. We cannot be a laughing stock to the world. We want people around the world to look to us for leadership and look to us for inspiration. And I feel very strongly that's something that we need to maintain. So I think it translates. I love it. And I can talk to you about it all day long. There's certainly all sorts of fun experiences that we had in that. Took it public, understand how that whole game works. There were a lot of experiences that were open to me from my tenure there.
And we'll be in touch about many more of your experiences to come. Kyle,
Perfect.
That's it from me. Thank you so much for your time today.
Jenny, thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you.